Fracture Field is one of those games that seems simple at first, but the more you play, the more you realize there's a lot going on under the hood. It's not the type of game that's going to hold your hand and explain everything. You kind of figure it out as you take hits. So if you want to stop learning through trial and error and start playing more consistently, stay right here because these 10 tips will make a difference. I'm Matthew, and the video is about to start. Don't do your first world fracture the first chance the game gives you. The prestige system exists precisely to reset your operation and return you stronger with core fragments, but it only really pays off when you've accumulated enough fragments for the next run to have a real impact. Many people's mistake is thinking that unlocking prestige already means it's time to use it. In practice, a reset that's too early can throw you into a new race without real strength, making it feel like you've gone back several steps instead of accelerating progression. To me, the safest point is waiting for at least 30 core fragments, because then the gain of dust and basic resources in the next run starts to become much more noticeable. This matters a lot because the game revolves around turning dust into global power, improving attributes like fracture, pierce, and hit speed, while stone and clay help boost your local economy and sustain the climb. When you prestige with few fragments, this permanent return is still too small, so the next attempt doesn't come with that boost that should make the reset worth it. The way I see it is simple. The first prestige shouldn't be an anxiety button, but a turning point button. When you feel that progress has really started to slow down, and you hold out until you gather enough fragments, World Fracture stops being a weak reset and starts functioning as a real leap in progression. It's exactly this patience that separates a run that starts off limping from one that comes back with a strong base, more dust, and much more control over the early game. There's a very common trap that seems logical at first but starts to hold you back when the game gets really tough: investing only in raw damage. At first glance, it seems like the most obvious choice because a bigger number is always seductive. But when you start hitting layers of hard rock, it becomes clear that just increasing base damage doesn't always solve the problem in the most efficient way. That's where Acuity starts to show why it's usually more worth it. In practice, it tends to deliver a better return for the cost because it helps your damage work better against tougher rocks, rather than just inflating the raw number without changing the quality of the impact. What I like about this upgrade is that it doesn't just look strong on paper. It gives that feeling of cleaner progression, as if each upgrade actually clears the path instead of just masking the slowness. The most important detail is that Acuity gets even better when it synergizes with any effect that reduces rock hardness. Then the game changes completely because you aren't just hitting harder, you're weakening the barrier and making better use of every hit. This is why so many people notice this overlap between Acuity and other upgrades related to Pierce. When you build this combination right, the yield on hard layers goes up much more than stubbornly raising basic damage. In Fracture Field, not every damage increase is actually power. Against hard rock, real power is efficiency, and Acuity usually delivers that better than raw damage alone. So if you feel like your progress has started to stall even after several upgrades, maybe the problem isn't a lack of strength, but investing in the wrong attribute. A tip that separates the average player from the really sharp one is understanding that bombs aren't just an emergency resource. They are part of your damage rhythm. Many people use them randomly, only when they remember or when they see a congested area. But when you realize that each bomb has its own cooldown, the game changes completely, because it stops being about waiting for the bomb to come back and starts being about cycling multiple tools at once. The strongest detail of this technique is precisely fitting the use of bombs between your manual clicks without breaking the flow of mining. It's almost like creating a cadence, a cycle. You mine by hand, drop a bomb at the right moment, go back to clicking, slot another one in as soon as a different one is ready, and keep the pressure on the whole time. When this starts to become automatic, the DPS goes up in a way that makes it seem like your build got stronger even without changing any upgrades. Another very important point is using the shortcut of holding X to visualize the radius before dropping the bomb. This seems like a small detail, but in practice, it avoids a lot of waste. Instead of throwing by eye and hoping to hit the ideal area, you position with precision and turn every explosion into real value. I like this tip because it doesn't depend on luck or extra grind. It depends only on good execution, and this type of technique is usually what accelerates progress most in incremental games. To me, the best way to think about this is like a true symphony. Manual click, explosion, repositioning, click again. Another bomb coming in at the right time. If you use a bomb only once in a while, it seems useful. If you master the timing, it becomes a central part of your damage rotation. And in Fracture Field, this kind of micro-optimization makes a big difference because adding small, well-timed actions almost always yields more than simply playing harder with brute force. A tip I find very strong is to stop seeing the supervisor drone as a generic support button and start treating it as a value burst tool. Instead of activating it randomly, I like to save it for the right moment. That point where all my machines are already converging on the same deposit, and I know it's worth turning a few seconds into absurd damage. In Fracture Field, progression revolves around mining, automation, and upgrades that accelerate your ability to break and scale resources. What makes this tip so good is that the supervisor drone doesn't just wake up idle drones, it also gives that temporary boost to movement and click speed. The practical difference is huge because your drones stop looking like a scattered group and start functioning as a concentrated force. When I use this on a high-value deposit, the feeling is exactly like a burst. Everything collapses onto the target and the ore disappears much faster than it would in the normal flow. To me, the biggest mistake is using this ability in dull moments. When your operation is still dispersed, you might get some value, but it's far from the real potential. The supervisor drone truly shines when you create the ideal situation for it, with everyone focused on a single important point, because then the buff turns into real progression, acceleration, and not just a pretty improvement on paper. I think of this mechanic almost like an execution button in the mid and late game. It's not something to press on impulse, it's something to synchronize with the moment a rare or valuable deposit needs to go down immediately. When you start using the supervisor drone this way, it stops being just operational comfort and becomes one of the most efficient tools for blowing through important resources without wasting time. In the beginning, it's very natural to unlock clay and sandstone and immediately want to leave basic stone behind as if it were old content. But the game kind of tricks you there. Initial stone isn't disposable. It's literally the hidden engine of your economy. When you start investing in stone mastery, things change scale completely. What seemed like a weak layer turns into an absurd dust factory. And since dust is the universal resource, you start to feel everything flowing better. More expensive upgrades stop being a block and become just a matter of time. It's that classic incremental moment where the game opens up. The most interesting part is that this creates a very strong snowball effect. While many people are racking their brains trying to extract efficiency from new, still weak layers, you already have a solid base generating dust all the time. In practice, you use the old to boost the new, not the other way around. This really speeds up progress, especially for the more expensive research that seems impossible at the start. Honestly, once you understand this, the game changes completely. You stop thinking about replacing layers and start thinking about layer synergy. And then Basic Stone stops being just the beginning of the game and becomes one of the most important pieces of your build until the mid-late game. It's almost counterintuitive, but that's exactly why it's so strong. This Quarry Foreman might seem like just another quality of life improvement at first, but in practice, it completely changes the way you play. Before NEM, you're stuck in that annoying cycle of micromanaging drones all the time, and that totally breaks the rhythm of the game. After you unlock this automation via World Fracture, it's as if the game finally starts playing along with you. Drones automatically start prioritizing new layers as soon as they appear, which is essential because in the early mid-game, you're unlocking new stuff all the time. Without this, you lose efficiency simply by not being able to keep up with everything manually. The real impact comes in consistency. With the Quarry Foreman, you no longer depend on coming back every minute to adjust production. Your progress remains optimized even when you're focused on upgrades, research, or even leaving the game running idle. This greatly increases your passive gain and avoids that silent waste that many people don't even realize is happening. To me, this is the type of upgrade you should rush without a second thought. It's not just about comfort, it's about pure efficiency. In incremental games, automation isn't a luxury. It's a progress multiplier. And the Quarry Foreman is exactly that. One of those upgrades that once you get it, you can't imagine playing without. Many people look at tools only thinking about damage or mining speed, but the real game is in the range. When you start investing in tools with more fracture, break radius, and pierce perforation, you aren't just mining more, you're expanding your influence on the map. And that's where the detail that few people notice comes in. The larger range isn't just for breaking more blocks per click, it literally activates more drones around you. In other words, each of your actions stops being isolated and becomes an area trigger. You click on one point and suddenly there's a chain of drones being activated and working together. This completely transforms the rhythm of your production. In practice, this creates an absurd synergy with automation. Even with idle drones scattered around, a tool with good range ensures they spring into action much more frequently. It's as if you were constantly turning on your own factory just with your clicks. And the result of this is a passive gain disguised as manual action, which speeds up progress immensely. Honestly, once you start prioritizing range in your tools, it's hard to go back. The game becomes smoother, more satisfying, and above all, more efficient. It's not just about breaking faster, it's about making each click count for several at once. And in an incremental, that's practically a legitimate cheat code. This tip right here completely defines the direction of your late game in Fracture Field. There's a moment when clicking simply stops scaling well, the rocks get too hard, the time between each break increases, and that feeling of rapid progress starts to disappear. This is exactly where collector drones stop being optional and become the heart of your strategy. The most interesting part is that they change the logic of the game. Instead of depending on your direct action, you start building an economy that runs itself. While manual clicking suffers from the resistance of more advanced layers, the drones continue collecting steadily without loss of efficiency. It's a more stable type of progress, and in the long run, much more powerful. In practice, this means that insisting on clicking in the late game is almost a waste of time. You can still help in specific moments, but the bulk of your production will come from the drones working passively. And when you start investing heavily in them, you realize the game enters another rhythm. That classic idle state where you evolve even without being focused all the time. To me, this is the point where Fracture Field really becomes a hardcore incremental. You stop playing actively all the time and start optimizing systems that play for you. And collector drones are exactly that, not just a help, but the foundation of post-game progress. Ignoring them is basically stalling your own evolution. Many people look first at upgrades that make mining stronger or faster in the moment, but I like to think of dust as the resource that truly unlocks the game in the long term. When you increase this gain early on, every broken rock starts pushing your account forward in a much more consistent way. The reason is that dust isn't just there to give you that feeling of immediate progress, it feeds exactly the most valuable part of permanent progression. So when you prioritize any double or multiplier effect on this resource, you aren't just farming more, you're shortening the path to upgrades that continue making a difference for a long time. To me, this is the type of choice that separates a run that moves well from a run that really starts to scale. The most interesting part is that this type of upgrade has an almost invisible effect at first, but an absurd one after a while. You don't just feel a small bonus, you feel the whole game starting to respond better because the prestige tree accelerates along with it. And I really like this logic in incrementals. Instead of investing only in what breaks the rock now, you invest in what transforms every future break into more valuable progress. If you have the option to double dust, treat it as a real investment. It might not be the flashiest upgrade on the screen, but it's one of those that returns the most value throughout the run. In Fracture Field, growing faster isn't just about hitting harder, it's about making every action yield more, and doubling dust does exactly that. Man, this F9 tip in Fracture Field is one of those that seems simple, but completely changes the way you play. When I discovered this, it was like, why is no one talking about this? Because in an incremental game, the secret isn't just playing well, it's letting the game work for you. And F9 literally turns the game into a silent and efficient auto farm. The most interesting part is how this solves a classic problem: CPU consumption. Usually, leaving an idle game open ends up weighing on your PC, especially if you're doing other things at the same time. With the hidden mode activated, the game stays light, almost invisible, but continues to progress. It's that kind of quality of life feature that seems small, but in practice, it gives you hours and hours of free progress. Another thing I really liked is the psychological factor. You aren't tied to the game, you can leave it running while you work, watch something, or even play something else. And when you come back, boom, accumulated resources, mining going full steam. This makes progress much more consistent because you don't just depend on active playtime. If you want to evolve quickly in Fracture Field, this tip isn't optional, it's essential. Using F9 is basically playing in smart mode, taking advantage of idling the right way. Anyone who ignores this is, without realizing it, falling behind in terms of efficiency.